Hey everyone, Jeff O'Connor here. I'm one of the co-lead pastors of Christian Life Fellowship. We find ourselves in a time right now where peace is a hot commodity. It feels like the world is burning around us, and if you find yourself at all wondering how in the world am I supposed to have peace internally in my mind and in my heart while everything else is going crazy around me, this video is for you. We've asked a friend of ours, she's a member of this church, her name is Dr. Richelle Hoekstra-Anderson. She is a clinical psychologist and she's also a life and leadership transformation coach. We just asked her to sit down for a little bit and let us pick her brain on some practical tools for your toolbox on how to lean into the life that God has created you to live, even in the middle of all the chaos that we find ourselves in. So, Richelle, it's great to have you here today.
Well, it's great to be here because, we're all just trying to get through this the best we can. And certainly some of the things I have to share with you, Jeff, I mean, as a human being, I've felt everything that you just mentioned in the introduction. And just trying to go back to what do I know to be true in this situation that I know helps me when I tune into the truths. And it's also what I've been offering to people to help them get through this time, whether it's my own family or it's clients of mine, but anybody. So I'm really glad to be able to be here with you and just talk about this, see what we can do to help.
Good. Why don't you talk to us, just give us I already kind of gave a little bit of a teaser, but just explain what it is that you do, a little bit about your business.
Yeah. Well, in essence, I help people move forward with their lives, and that's really what coaching is. People feel stuck in various things, and it could be transformations of they're going through a loss, maybe they're grieving a death of somebody or a dream, or loss of a job, divorce, empty nest, I mean, you name it, or they're just trying to up-level their careers. I mean, so change shows up in many different ways, and there is a process that I use that really helps people to grieve some of the losses as they're moving forward, learning about themselves, discovering who they are, so that they can become aligned with who they're here to be and growing and transforming their lives into the best version of themselves, which is what I believe God has brought us here to earth for, is to maximize who we are to benefit His kingdom. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, talk to us a little bit about, so with that background on what you do, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing. And I don't just mean culturally what's going on, but I mean just in general where we find ourselves, the journey that we're all on, what we're feeling, and what this experience is like.
Right. Well, when I talk with people about change, I oftentimes reference something called the journey of change, which is a model, a framework, so to speak, to help us to visualize what is going on here. So if you think about it, it's like we had the old normal. The old normal, and I use the metaphor of a boat. So it's like we're in a boat. That boat represents our lives, and it was in safe harbor. It was life as we knew it. And then this huge change comes. So it's like this windstorm comes up, in this case, COVID-19.
Right.
And what happened is we broke free from the harbor, and we are adrift. I mean, it's like our boat, our lives are in the sea of the unknown. And what's crazy about it is it isn't just us individually. It may not just be our family, and it may not just be a network of people who've lost one person, for example, in the case of death. It's the world.
Yeah. And
everybody is at sea, okay? And so what happens is, as we're drifting, it's almost like we bump into an island. And it's like our boat just kind of shows up and we get out and we're on this island trying to figure out, where am I? What is this? And as we're wandering on the island, we're trying to get reoriented to normal. So in that, we have all these emotions and all these experiences. I mean, the first one that tends to come up, I remember for me when I first started hearing about the virus, is like, oh, it's not gonna get here. It's not gonna be that big deal. That's the denial. Right. Or even as I was becoming aware, oh, this isn't gonna last that long. And then you wake up to the next day and it's like, oh my gosh, I can't leave my house.
Right. And at this point, we're 5 weeks into that.
Is it only 5?
Yeah.
It feels like 55.
Seriously.
So then in that, we start feeling all these other emotions like, wait a minute, what's going to happen with my job? My finances, the kids, I've got to take care of them. Wait, I didn't sign up to be a homeschooling parent.
Yeah.
the whole issue of what about my parents who I can't even be around them and they're all by themselves. And so then there's like, you start getting mad. Some days I feel just darn mad about this whole thing. It's not fair. And who can I blame?
Yeah.
Who can I blame? Can I blame the president? Can I blame the governor? Who do I blame?
Right.
And you see an awful lot of that going on in our culture. And then there's just a sadness.
Yeah.
There are some days I'm just really super sad. And that's and everything I'm saying when I say me, it's the stuff I'm hearing everybody else saying as
Right.
well. And so that's kind of what we're doing. And what I want to say about that is it's not like this linear process like, oh, I first feel, denial, then I go into this whole anger, and then I go into anxiety, and then I get to the other side of where I start to accept it. Not there yet, okay? So what we do is we swirl around back and forth, and you could have any number of emotions in 5 minutes. Not to mention, or you could have a day where you're just mad all day and you're crabby and you're irritable and people don't want to be around you. And then you go to bed and you start feeling terrible about that and you feel anxious and all these things that we can circle back and forth, back and forth. So it's kind of almost like a maddening process emotionally, because for a lot of people before this, maybe you were just kind of going along just fine. And now this has happened, your emotions have essentially hijacked your brain. Because we have it's like a tsunami of change.
Right.
Because it's not just us, it's everybody. We can't look anywhere and see somebody who says, oh, here's the answer.
So what do we do with that? So I love that phrasing. It's like your emotions have hijacked your brain. Emotions they're not bad in and of themselves. I mean,
Right.
Correct? You're
Absolutely.
the psychologist, so.
No, you're absolutely right. Well, God gave us emotions, did
Yeah.
He? Not.
Yeah, they're amoral. They are not bad or good. They
just are. But what I say about emotions is that they are pieces of information. They help us to tune into our own internal experiences, because really our emotions are energy states. So when you think about when you're really super excited, you feel like you want to move, but when you get really sad, you may kind of just want to go inward, or if you're agitated, you might feel like you have to do something. And so those energy states lead us to something. But when we're feeling really stuck, and if we don't feel comfortable in those emotions, what we tend to do is try to distract ourselves. Where's my phone? Let me scroll through Facebook, or look at the news, just binge watch news or Netflix, or, go drink a beer, or, what are the various things people do to distract? And I had someone say to me recently, I really have a hard time just writing what I'm feeling because it just makes me feel really helpless, and so I just want to get away from it. And so those feelings can be so powerful and they're so uncomfortable, and then we label them as bad feelings or negative. Those are bad feelings. No, they're just feelings, but here's the word I like to use. They're difficult. So how do you manage your difficult feelings is really the question.
Yeah, and that's what I want to make sure that we get to that everybody, that may be listening so far, if they're going like, yep, that's me, I feel all those kinds of feelings, what do I do with that? Is there a process out of this? Is there a way out of this, or maybe not out of it, but to flourish in the middle of what we find ourselves in?
Absolutely, because I'm going to tell you right now, if we don't deal with our feelings, in other words, if we just try to push them down, I want you to think about it like if you were to take a big beach ball and you were to take your hands and you push it under the water, what would happen when you released it?
It comes flying up out of the water.
And it flies up.
Yeah.
It doesn't just kind of bubble up. And that's what you see with people, is that when they try to repress, suppress, distract, get away from, it sneaks out. It's going to come out. Those emotions that you are trying to push down, they will come out. But so often, at times that wait, I didn't expect that. You say something inappropriate to somebody, or you do something that's really not healthy or helpful.
Right.
And it's because those emotions have to be addressed. And it's almost like they're saying, if you're not going to take care of me, I'm going to force you to pay attention to me. And they will come out in some very unhealthy ways.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking it. We will deal with our emotions at some point.
Yep.
They will force their way out. Whether we deal with them in a healthy way or whether we deal with them in an unhealthy way, they're going to come to the surface.
So here's what I say: pay me now or pay me later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the emotion is, so how do we invite difficult emotions? So do you want to talk about that right now? Would that make sense?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of the things when I'm working with people, I talk with them because a word that we use a lot in our culture is anxiety. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, anxiety is through the roof right now.
Right.
So is depression. But I want to talk about anxiety just a little bit because it has become a catch-all term that is very diffuse and it's hard to get your hands around. But what we really find is what I've learned to ask people is a different question that actually gets deeper, that is more helpful to use than the word anxious. Mm-hmm. And there are essentially 8 difficult emotions that we can label, and we can have variations of the names of them, but they are 8 core difficult emotions that when people say they're anxious, and I'll say, now if you couldn't use the word anxious, I want you to instead look at this list of 8 and tell me which one comes closer to it. So let me tell you what the 8 are. Okay. Anger, disappointment, embarrassment, frustration, helplessness, sadness, shame, and vulnerability. Have you felt any of those things, Jeff, since all of this has started?
Yes.
Have you found yourself on some days that you felt at least one or more of them?
Absolutely.
How about before all this happened? What would you say what your experience was of difficult emotions on any given day?
Yeah, I mean, that's I feel like if anything, all this has done is multiply or accelerate what I was already dealing with, what we were all already dealing with. We were all already very complex creatures living in a complex world, dealing with all kinds of complex scenarios, and this just blew it up and multiplied it times a massive factor. And so it doesn't feel like it's anything new. It just feels like it's the same things, but just in a greater degree. At least to me, that's been my experience.
Right. So what you're saying is that these are all normal emotions that you've had all along. What makes this even more challenging for us is that this is on top of whatever else.
Correct.
So I think if for an example is, let's say you were having some challenging situations or discipline issues with a teenager or with a younger child, but you got a break when they went to school. And now you're with them all the time. What emotions are coming up for you? And what are you doing with those? And again, people do various things to try to get away from them or try to bring it down or just get a release. Mm-hmm. But is it really taking care of the deeper emotion? And so if we can, first of all, the task I have for people is I have 3 things I have them know about. And it really comes from a psychologist named Dr. Joan Rosenberg, who came up with a very simple way of looking at difficult emotions. And one of the things she said is there's 3 things we need to do. Is first of all, ask ourselves one question. What am I feeling right now? And this is really in the context of we're feeling discomfort, okay? Mm-hmm. We're in a place of difficulty. So the first question is, what am I feeling? So go to that list of 8 emotions that I said. Okay, anger, disappointment, embarrassment, frustration, helplessness, sadness, shame, vulnerability. Which of those? Okay, so it's one question, 8, 90. Okay, so that's the formula, 1, 8, 90. Now let me explain to you what the 90 part is. Okay, so one question, what am I feeling? 8, which of the 8? 90 is, this is the cool part, because I know you like kind of this brain stuff, Jeff. 90 seconds, that's the amount of time it takes for your brain to release a biochemical that's associated with an emotion. So when I'm feeling angry, my brain is releasing chemicals, biochemicals that go through my body, and you will feel it in certain parts of your body, right? Where do you usually feel your anger?
Well,
physically, I mean, if you really were to identify, where do you feel it? I mean, I can kind of feel it in my chest,
or people feel tension in their shoulders, they feel themselves tightening up.
Right. So my point is that, and remember what I said before, that emotions are basically physical energy. Right. And so they're energy states, and the chemicals that are being released when we have an emotion, it only lasts about 90 seconds. Well, who knew that? I thought, what do you mean? It seems like when I'm mad for a long time, or I'm feeling sad, that might go on. The point of saying this is that the 90 seconds is that is a cycle. So when I tune into, let's just use the word anger, Richelle, you're in a moment of anger right now, and I'm now actually modeling something I teach people, is to use your name and to identify the emotion, because it actually enables you to take one step back from it And now invite the experience. Say, okay, I'm in a moment of anger, and so, I'm just feeling so angry right now. Man, I'm so mad. I'm so mad. This is just, I'm so angry. 90 seconds is what it's going on. Now, what did I just do? 1, I identified the emotion. 2, I invited it. And 3, I recognize that it's not going to last forever. Now, does it mean it'll go away after 90 seconds? No, it doesn't. What it does mean, though, is the more I review it, the more I'm going to keep cycling through the 90 seconds. 60 to 90 seconds is what they have found in science, how long it takes for that full biochemical reaction in your body. Now, where do we go from here with this? Mm-hmm. So, okay, now I've identified my emotion, I've invited it, and I've said, Richelle, Jeff, talk to yourself. I'm in this moment. Okay, what you're doing in this place is now you're going to welcome the emotion, and you're going to also introduce something that I call a practice of self-compassion. Because, Jeff, we're hard on ourselves. Most of us are really hard on ourselves, and we feel stupid for having feelings. We don't want people to know, and we think this is ridiculous. Right. I don't want anyone to, we stuff. But when you identify it, now your next step is to say, wow, this is really hard. And so self-compassion involves 3 things. First of all, it's just becoming mindful of what's going on in the moment. And that was what I just told you. Right. It's just identifying what's going on with me right now. We don't do enough asking ourselves. We don't do enough going inward and asking what is going on. We're so busy out here that we're not going in here.
And I would say that that's probably always been an issue for humanity, but in our current climate, with technology and with the flow of information constantly, the ability to slow down and think about how we're thinking and to think about what we're feeling is massively limited because of that. I mean, It's not normal for us to do that, to just be quiet and to think.
Well, for crying out loud, the phone's going off half the time,
Right.
So there's
Even
other
to sit down for this interview,
I know.
we had to both go, okay, we got to turn our phones on to silent and
Yep.
make sure that they're not, we don't have notifications going off during this.
Well, and then if you got little kids that are wandering around you, or the TV's blaring, or, who knows what else is going on. You're in the midst of a busy workday.
Right.
And there's all those distractions. So when we note an emotion and we say, I'm going to just take a moment here and catch my breath. Mm-hmm. And literally, that's what we're going to do. So I identify, so the mindfulness is, what am I feeling right now? This isn't going to last forever. This is a moment in time, and it's not going to last forever if I actually take care of it. Because remember what I said, what we don't address, it's like what we resist persists. And so let's just grab it and stop resisting it. Let's just embrace it for a moment. Not saying we love it, not saying we want it, but it is. It is what it is. So when we do that, what happens then is we take the step of, okay, this is what's going on. This is being mindfully present in the moment. Mm-hmm. Second thing is important to say is, this is common to people. There are people all over the world right now who are angry and frustrated and sad and feeling helpless and vulnerable. I'm part of that common humanity. I'm just being me. I'm being human. That's important to acknowledge that piece, because so often when we're feeling icky, how do you like that for a diagnostic term?
Is that the clinical term?
Yeah, I love that word, icky, because I think it really captures a lot. But when we're feeling that way, really it's so isolating sometimes.
Right, we start to feel like we're the only one that's ever felt this way.
Which then becomes even worse. And let me just throw in a spiritual element to this, if I may. Isn't that what the enemy's all about?
Yeah.
He wants us to hide in the dark. He doesn't want people to know what we really feel. Even when we walk into church on Sunday, when you say, hey, how you doing this morning? Well, I just came in. I had a really rotten morning, but I'm not going to tell you I'm in church. I put my church face on. We do that all the time because we believe that's what we're supposed to do, and that our emotions aren't okay for people. Well, they're not okay for us, and we don't want to put them on other people until the beach ball comes, popping out of the water type of thing. Then we have to deal with it.
Right.
So common humanity is about the connection to everybody around us. As believers, non-believers, we all have feelings. God has created us with them. The third piece in this, dealing with the difficult emotions, is self-kindness. Choosing to be kind to yourself in the moment. And this is how I teach people to do that. And it's very simple. And it comes from some science that I won't go into all of it, but it's called heart math. And it's a 3-step process, and it involves literally your heart. Now, it's interesting because your heart is the center of who you are. When Scripture talks all about the heart. it's a place to tune into, okay? So I want to teach you something, and first thing we do, and I'm going to invite you to do it with me, Jeff. So in fact, I think it's helpful to uncross our legs because we get all bound up in that. Yeah. So if we can just have an open posture, and the first thing is just to put your hand over your heart. And the reason we physically put our hand on our heart, come on, you can do it with me.
Okay. I didn't know if you meant then or...
No, you do it right with me right now. Hand over heart is it's a way to signal to our brains, just tune into here. Not to all the thoughts, but let's just kind of bring our thought here. Heart focus. Now the next piece of that is to just take a nice, slow, deep breath in through your nose. And then you just kind of release that. Now you see, my eyes just automatically went closed, and people can have their eyes down, they can have them closed. But just for a moment, you're just going to keep your mind focused on your heart. And just taking some nice, slow inhale, hold your breath briefly, and exhale through your mouth. So inhale slowly. And the third part to this is heart focus, heart breathing, and the third is heart feeling. And in the heart feeling, what I want people to do is to connect to something that you feel grateful for. Something that fills your heart with a feeling of love, security, gratitude, something, maybe a place you've been. For me, I imagine my little white Sammy American Eskimo who's all fuzzy and warm, and he's on my lap, and I feel love from him. And when I do heart feeling, I just feel grateful for that animal. It could be a place you go in your mind's eye. Now, as you're breathing, your mind, as it wants to go elsewhere, and it's okay, those thoughts will come in your mind. You just want to just gently say, come on back to the heart. Come back here. Now, here's another piece to the self-compassion, is that whenever anyone is in a moment of difficulty, and you can be anywhere, and you can just put it as a hand signal to yourself. When you put your hand on your heart, you are taking care of yourself. Now, here's another science piece to all of that, is that, when someone's hurting and you want to extend compassion to them, isn't it kind of natural that we kind of reach out our hand and we, maybe lightly touch them on the arm or the knee or whatever? It releases something called oxytocin, which is a hormone that's called the Cuddle Hormone. And they talk about it with newborns and their mothers, that there's this oxytocin, when there's nursing going on. But here's the really interesting thing, is that oxytocin is released when we hug people and when we reach out to support people. But what I didn't realize is that we trigger oxytocin in ourselves when we do this.
That's awesome.
Seriously. And it was so mind-blowing, but it's so simple. And if you're not comfortable doing this, I've taught people that it's okay to just kind of gently put your hand in. It's kind of like you would just reach out. What would you do to somebody?
Okay.
So this is getting weird, probably.
No, this actually lends into a great, because I'm uncomfortable with that. So if they choose to cut to the camera shot of me putting my hand over my head, even when you had your eyes closed, I'm like, you should close your eyes. And I'm like, I'm not really comfortable closing my eyes right now. I'm not. Okay. Right. So here's what I want to dispel a little bit the myth of, I think that we have improperly differentiated between psychological and spiritual in some ways, and I think we've made them two separate things when they're not necessarily two separate things. I think we've made a difference between the spiritual and the physical, the spiritual and the emotional, the spiritual and the mental, all of that. And I think even when we start talking, so I get uncomfortable, not because there's anything wrong with it, but just because this isn't the language that I would typically use or the way that I would typically be. So actually, I appreciate the giving permission to go, just put your hand on your thigh. Okay, I can do that, all right? But I think what I want to make sure, you said something to me when I reached out to you through Zoom, which, by the way, we are, I think we're 6 feet apart. This is pretty darn close to 6 feet. So we're doing our best to stay socially distanced here, be responsible. But when I reached out to you on a Zoom call and we started talking, something came out of your mouth that I went, okay, I'm talking to the right person. This is who I actually want to sit down and have this conversation with. You said, when we talk about our thought processes and our emotions, this is not just a bunch of, you use the phrase psychological mumbo jumbo or something along those lines. And I went, okay, talk to me a little bit about that, because there are great, what we're dealing with our emotions, dealing with our thought life, and those things are connected. And I know you've got some scaffolding you're going to lead us through with that, but that is central to a lot of what God instructs us in His Word. And I know some of that even has to do with the name of your business and some of the scriptures that you use for that. I don't know if you want to, if you're okay with a little bit of an aside before we get back into some of the practical things.
Absolutely.
Just in case somebody sat through the first however long that was and is kind of going, okay, this is getting a little hokey for me. Let's talk. Let's talk scripture and talk the mind that God has given to us. All right, we want to push pause right now. That completes part 1. We've got a PDF that we have available for you with some information, some notes, just for you to look over the content that we just covered during this last session. Or if you just want to head right into part 2, that's, have at it. So thanks for tuning in.